So what do you think about well-being in Japanese companies?
I think well-being is about taking care of yourself, elevating the self-respect we have, the care for the self we have. And in doing so, what companies and individuals find is that their lives are better. Companies are more performant, they are more successful, they are more powerful, and individuals are happier. And they're enjoying life to a much higher degree. YuLife's changing the way people think about and have relationships with insurance. So historically, insurance has been this thing that people buy and they put in a drawer and they forget about it.
Right.
With YuLife, we're present with you every day, and we're incentivizing you constantly to live your best life, mentally, physically, and financially.
The users, when they use YuLife, it's not, they don't feel like filling a boring document or something, but it's like playing a game.
It's like pleasure. And what we like to do is reframe it as a benefit, as a core benefit. Turnover costs a lot of money. You lose the productivity of the person that leaves. You've got to pay to recruit someone new. Absenteeism is a stress. I know in Japan, people do disappear.
Right.
And that is a frustration. So building a more connected and cohesive culture at work becomes a solution to reducing this kind of behavior.
はい、注目のゲストをお呼びして、キャリア、事業内容、ビジョンを深掘りする&トーク始まります。今回はですね、福利厚生スタートアップから学ぶ日本とイギリスウェルビーイングの未来をテーマに YuLife の提供でお送りします。この YuLife という会社はですね、健康、つまりウェルビーイングに特化したイギリス発の福利厚生スタートアップなんですね。本当にこの福利厚生、健康にフォーカスすることで、企業やビジネスのパフォーマンスがどう変わっていくのかっていうのを日本とイギリス両方の国の現状を学びながらウェルビーイングのあり方について考えていきたいと思います。So Josh Hart from YuLife, welcome to Pivot.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you are the co-founder of YuLife and also the Chief Product and Tech Officer. So what does YuLife do? What's your business?
YuLife's changing the way people think about and have relationships with insurance. So historically, insurance has been this thing that people buy and they put in a drawer and they forget about it.
Right.
With YuLife, we're present with you every day, and we're incentivizing you constantly to live your best life, mentally, physically, and financially. And we do this through rewarding you for walking, mindfulness, fitness challenges.
So it's like a game or something?
Yes, exactly. It's like a game. And we have people, now hundreds of thousands of people playing it in Europe. And experiencing YuLife every day.
Wow.
With their insurance.
Because when I hear insurance or well-being, it seems kind of boring, So it's very different, your service.
Exactly, yeah. So I think looking back about maybe it was 10 years ago, I was thinking about these kind of financial services where there are, in the West, it's very disintermediated and people aren't really thinking about what they're getting every day from their insurance policies. They make the decision to plan for the future, but then they've got this monthly expense going out of their checking account every day or every month, like a Netflix subscription or an Amazon Prime subscription, but they don't get any benefit because it's ultimately there to protect their loved ones if they were to pass away. This is the case of life insurance. And me and my co-founders felt that wasn't good enough. Like we should be doing more in trying to prevent these incidents occurring and making people feel more connected every day to, not the insurance, but what the insurance is meant to enable, which is you to live an amazing life.
Interesting. And you guys have partnership with Dai-ichi Seimei, one of the greatest insurance companies in Japan. So that's why you're here in Japan today.
Exactly. So we were very fortunate a couple of years ago to have Dai-ichi Life invest in our Series C round. And they joined an amazing cap table of wonderful investors from financial investors in the West. And so they invited us to come and see whether our product would land well in Japan. And we really, since we've been here, we've loved it. And we've had some really nice early adoption. And we are just really getting our name out there, trying to get known by everyone around, helping companies look after their staff, incentivizing them to live well, and also to provide different insurance so that people can mitigate risk for their staff.
So do you like Japan?
I love Japan. I don't know if any Westerner comes to Japan and doesn't say they love Japan. That being said, as you spend more time in Japan, your relationship definitely changes.
Yes.
The things that are romanticized on day one are not as romantic like 2 months in.
So you know the reality of it.
Yeah, the reality does set in and some of the bureaucracy can get a little bit tedious. But there is so much depth and magic and reasoning behind everything here. And that's something that I really admire that there are layers to the Japanese culture and the Japanese reasons. Everything has much deeper meaning than first glance. And it's almost in many ways the opposite of sometimes what I experience in the West, where everything can be quite superficial.
Yeah.
And I think that is an amazing thing to be able to experience.
Interesting. So we have a lot of things to talk about today, but I want to break it to 4 parts. And number 1 is, why did a UK startup choose to launch in Japan? So that's my first question. And the number 2 is well-being a priority for Japanese companies? Because you know both companies, East and the West. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. And number 3, the all-in-one app and about YuLife.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about what's your service like, what's your app like. And finally, we like to discuss how did YuLife get 85% of their users feeling more productive at work?
Yes.
So my first question, so why did a UK startup choose Japan as your market?
Yeah, so Japan isn't my only market, actually. I have, the UK was where I started, but I've been to America. I've got a business in South Africa. I've also got customers across Europe. And this, I think in terms of Asia, Japan is my first Asian country that I'm looking at. And I think a big part of that is to do with the market here. The market itself in the insurance space is, you have one of the greatest penetrations of people that adopt and purchase insurance products in the world. People here take real responsibility for their financial dependence.
Yes.
And I think that's an amazing thing. And it means that I would look at Japanese economy as a late stage insurance economy, and very, very effectively adopted the products and services that insurers offer. And that's why I think in a super commoditized market, which is late stage, there really is opportunity to differentiate and build something novel when everything is so much feels like a commodity. It all feels the same at this point. So really trying to bring insurance back to life in this part of the world.
So what are the challenges in entering the Japanese market? Do you recognize any difference between a UK company or a Western business scene and also a Japanese? Any differences?
I would say, bearing in mind, this is coming through the lens of a British person. So I'd say, if I was to look for the polar opposite, I would look towards America.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'd say Britain is closer to America, but definitely in the middle between Japan and America.
Interesting.
And I think that so you've got to acknowledge that from my perspective, I'm also very much not American. Not that I wouldn't want to be maybe one day, but for now, I'm a British citizen, and that's the context to which I grew up in. So I see a lot of familiarity with Britain and with Japan, and it's quite interesting. It feels quite familiar to me, the layered in conversation, things going unsaid. It's a very familiar dialogue that you have with different people.
So more nuanced?
Much more nuanced. So the reason we look at Japan and the reason we think there's a really special opportunity that goes beyond the market penetration, that goes beyond the cultural nuances and the similarities with the British culture, I think it's to do with the fact that in Japan, unlike, let's say, America, there are lots of old businesses here, and they've got lots of experience, lots of credibility. They've got 100 years of being in the market.
Right.
And there's something to be said about the Japanese culture, maybe unlike the American culture, really values heritage. It values Japanese business. It values Japanese stories, almost more so than it values the new. So it's an interesting situation. In America, I've got everyone talking about the new and dismissing the old. And here, it feels to me there's a bit of everyone talking about the old and dismissing the new.
Interesting, that's right.
And I don't think either are correct. I think ultimately both countries find a blend in the middle. And where I see YuLife doing something really different here is by partnering with Dai-ichi Life, we're mitigating a lot of that pain that a new entrant to a market would have by being a nobody, by having no history. And we get to benefit from all of that amazing depth and relationships that Dai-ichi Life has built with the country over the past 100 years when we launch YuLife, which is a new technology and experience in the Japanese market.
Do you think your business model fits the Japanese market in terms of Japanese people respecting the old, respecting tradition, respecting heritage? Does that fit together?
I think Japanese people respect it, but they also seek to be inspired. Like everyone, I think Japanese people are themselves very, you come across some really inspirational people here. But on top of that, they're looking for the new, but they want the comfort of the old. They want to know that someone who is of Japan has validated this as credible from the West. because historically, I think there were lots of Western businesses.
Yes.
They tried to operate in Japan. They weren't successful.
True.
So I think people look to other Japanese institutions to validate new technologies coming into this market.
Because I ask you this question because there's a lot of companies, mostly from the United States, they try to enter the Japanese market, but it doesn't, fit the market. So I'm curious, why did you enter the Japanese market, and do you have any confidence of succeeding in this market?
I have 100% confidence of succeeding in the Japanese market. There's no question to me as to whether we will be successful. The question is to the degree of how much can we change, how much can we transform the insurance market here, and that will come from how willing the market is to consume us, how willing the market is to participate or allow us to participate in it. I think one of the things that's very different about Western business and Eastern, and specifically Japanese, is Western businesses, I think of Apple, I think of Nike, I think of Disney. I think of identity. What does it mean to be a customer of Disney? It means I'm a princess, or I'm a prince, or I'm a superhero. What does it mean to be Nike? I'm an athlete.
Or a superstar.
I'm suddenly the pinnacle of mankind. What does it mean to be a customer of Apple? Is, here we've got them here, but we're creative geniuses.
We're innovative. We're entrepreneurs.
Exactly. So there's a lot of these identity things that American brands do really well. Interestingly, when I look at Japan, maybe I see Nintendo, which is interesting, but broadly speaking, I think that the brands here don't necessarily have that same deity nature.
That's true.
Right? So I've been thinking about this a lot. When I first came to Japan in 2019, I visited loads of Shinto shrines. And I learned a little bit about the religion here, Shintoism and the animistic religion. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not really Shinto, but it seems to me that in the fabric of every society, the experiences we have at any given moment are as a result of the history of what made the present culture exist. And for the present culture of Japan, Shintoism, Buddhism, these have been massive influences in what is today Japan. And this has also been massive influences in the brands that exist in Japan today. And whereas in the West, we have monotheistic religions where there is a single God and people are created in the image of God.
Yes.
And a lot of the brands also share that idea of being in the image of God. So when I look at Pokemon, and I think Pokemon's such an amazing brand. I've got some on the back of my iPad. I love it. I think it's great. But it's interesting. When I went to a Shinto shrine, I noticed that everybody had these little notepads and they were getting stamps of these little animals, which were the Shinto shrine's animal representative. And how interesting was it that they would go and they would collect these stamps at each shrine? And then I thought, when I was maybe 10, I was collecting Pokemon cards. And I thought, it seems very familiar to me how close Pokemon is to these stamp collections. And then a chap said to me just today, he was showing me this piece of paper where he'd gone on the train in Tokyo, and he's been collecting stamps with his son at each train stop. And they've been collecting the stamps. They've been traveling all around the city together. And at each stop, they stop and they go and they get the guy to stamp their little book. And I think it's interesting because these products, these experiences are in many ways derivative of something that many people have forgotten, which is this kind of much deeper religious culture that exists that isn't about necessarily compliance to the religion, but more about inspiration of what it can bring and enrich in life. And in the West, we also experience something very similar in the monotheistic religions, whereby people are seeing themselves in the image of God, and therefore brands that make us more godly by nature become more powerful. So then you think, okay, so what will work in Japan? Because we have two choices. Do we bring this idea of this deity, godly nature,
like a Nike type,
into Japan and build a brand that is enriching the self? Or do we have to go a different approach and do what Pokemon did and say, no, it's not the person that's godly, it's the environment, it's the other animals that are godly. So they then enrich the product, the thing that people purchase. That is the object of godliness. And I would say when I look at Japanese brands that are most successful, it's ones that create very special objects, things. Be it a Toyota car, it is a creation of a thing. It's not a brand.
Exactly.
It's not about who am I for driving a Toyota. It's about look at how amazing the spirit of the Toyota car is, and it's worthy, and we get to experience it, not that we are it. So that becomes quite an interesting challenge when you think about building a brand in Japan. What lens do we wish to look through, and do we want to bring something foreign? Because Nike's been successful in Japan.
Yes.
Do we bring that energy here? Or do we adapt our proposition to make more sense given the heritage of the country?
So YuLife, which path are you guys going to take?
I think about this a lot. We believe our mission is pretty simple. We want everybody to live their best life.
Yes.
Mentally, physically, financially. To do that, there is an element of elevating the self. Self-improvement, well-being, actualizing your potential, these are things that we think are our purpose. This is why we exist as a company. I think that's a worthy cause even in Japan, even if there is a bit of conflict between some of the societal norms, even if it's not about the self. Japan, is the opposite of toxic individualism. It can be toxic, the worst part of the West is the toxic individualism that can occur. But I'd say that equally the worst, the most challenging part of Japan is you also can have toxic groupthink.
Right.
So both sides have challenges. And when I think about the groupthink versus the individualism, I don't mind bringing a bit of individualism to Japan. I think that may be something that I can be proud of and I can bring. At the same time, my brand can be a bit more nuanced when it's here. I can make more compromises in my product to make sure it fits the society. And I can attribute more power to other aspects of my product, not just the brand identity.
So you're trying to mix the both cultures together?
Yeah, it's tough.
How can you put that into an actual product or service?
So in my product, we have avatars, for example. And in the West, I've got avatars that are people. They are images of me.
Yes.
I noticed something when I went to Japan, which is people don't make avatars. So in the West, everyone makes their avatar look like them.
Of a human being?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's designed like a person.
Yes.
In Japan, lots of people make their avatar not look like them.
Right.
They find the most weird, kooky way of making their avatar look literally nothing like them. And I found that very interesting because that means that in many ways then they don't identify themselves as the avatar, which is what's happening in the West.
Right.
They identify the avatar as their persona within the application.
Yes, so they use like a cat or a dog or
exactly.
an animal or even a plant or an
so
object.
Understanding whether to be flexible in certain rules of how I've designed my application to enable people not to have to confront that self, being spectacular in yourself, but maybe allowing you to have a persona in the universe.
Wow. So I'll put a screenshot of your service for our viewers, but you guys are using not human being avatars, but also animals.
Well, so we are looking at building them at the moment.
I see.
As we're still taking feedback from the Japanese market, but it's something I foresee as something we may need to do moving down the road. We do actually have animals throughout the application, which are imbued with values. So we have a giraffe. A giraffe is an animal with the land animal with the biggest mammal, with the biggest heart. And that's a big part of us. We love that. And it's something that we want everyone to see as the first creature that they engage with in the application. I think that does kind of play a bit to Shintoism, where you take an animal and you give it values. But I don't know if that's going to be me doing enough. So we may potentially also change the avatar experience.
Wow, Josh, you really know about Japanese culture, because I interview a lot of foreign entrepreneurs and they say, Japanese market is different. It's because of the language, or the culture is different. That's the way they put it. But I feel that you really kind of grasp the key to success in the Japanese market.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I hope so.
Why is that? Did you study a lot about Japan, or did you talk to the Daiichi Seimei people, or what's the secret?
I think it's for the same reason my app is very successful. Is I don't believe in the superficial.
Okay.
I think you can always go deeper into the why, into the why people are doing what they're doing. Why are they happy? Why are they sad? What creates an experience worthy of a human being? Apps sit on people's phones, and most apps go unused. In the end, you guys here, you use, I think it's
Line,
thank you.
The messaging app.
The messaging app. In the UK, we use WhatsApp, right?
Yes.
So at home, people have WhatsApp, they have Google Maps, they have Google Mail. They've got loads of other apps, but they don't really use them. My job was to be worthy of being another app on your phone that you use every day. And to do that is the same thing I did when approaching Japan, which is ask why. Why do you have cemeteries in the middle of your communities that people visit every at festivals?
Yes.
And why are there all the names of the ancestors put onto a stone? Why are people doing these things? And what's their motivation? And how can I secularize or take the best of it and make it accessible for everyone to be able to see and experience. I actually think one of the most beautiful things I experienced in Japan was I was here during a festival and I saw families go to a shrine in the middle of their community and pay homage to their ancestors. And I thought that was beautiful. I come from a culture where we bury our dead and we visit them once a year, and we go out to the middle of nowhere and we drive to the grave. And I thought, oh, this looks much nicer. This looks much more community. So I get inspired by lots of things. And I think just asking why always.
Okay, so having said that, let's go on to the second topic.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about well-being in Japanese companies. So well-being is starting to become like a buzzword in Japan. We call it well-being. So it seems kind of Western-ish.
Yes.
So what do you think about well-being in Japanese companies?
I think well-being is about taking care of yourself and taking care of your community, and your community supporting your journey to being a better version of yourself. So, for example, well-being for me is not allowing myself to get burnt out at work, where I'm much less productive. Well-being for me is taking 5, 10, 15 minutes a day to meditate and find calm, or to get my heart rate up for like 10 minutes a day so that I'm effectively using it, which means that I will ultimately live longer and live healthier. Well-being is really just about an individual caring about their body, their lifestyle, their being. When I started, I'll give you an example of the opposite. What is well-being when it goes wrong? Well-being isn't, when I was 17, I got kicked out of school and I was working as a janitor, and then I got my first job. And in my first job, I was getting paid quite well. And then someone offered me another job. And instead of quitting my first job, I decided to do 2 jobs at the same time, because I was like, oh my God, I was really broke. And I thought this would be a great way to make some money. So what I did was I did 2 jobs. And then I just kind of stopped sleeping. I would just go sleep for 2 hours and then go again and go again. I did this for months.
Wow.
I did this for months. I worked 7 days a week for like 6 months. And then I collapsed in the airport with vertigo. I was 20.
Wow.
Maybe 21. And I hadn't been paying attention to my well-being. I hadn't been looking after myself. I hadn't been respecting my body and my mind. And I think that's what well-being is about. It's about elevating the self-respect we have, the care for the self we have. And in doing so, what companies and individuals find is that their lives are better. Companies are more performant, they are more successful, they are more powerful, and individuals are happier. And they're enjoying life to a much higher degree. And what's the point of being here if we're not all trying to make the most of it?
Do you think Japanese salarymen, we call it, but Japanese business people do you think they're healthy or well-being?
I think the well-being trend that kind of is coming over from the West, incidentally, I do think there's a lot of Japanese understanding around well-being. For example, it was the Japanese government that came out that announced the healthy business practices, that announced the macro realities that Japan is facing if companies don't take some degree of responsibility in looking after their staff, with this thing called METI, which is a certification that companies can get to say that we are a healthy organization. So I don't think, it's not entirely from the West, but I think the West is like really obsessed with it at the moment. I think the salarymen, in time, it will become, if those businesses care about hitting their numbers. And if you want to hit your numbers, we know definitively that a well staff perform better.
Yeah.
So the result will be whoever embodies it first, whoever adopts it first, ends up performing better. And it's through the business results, that I think people will engage with it much deeper.
Yes, because a lot of critics say that Japanese companies have low productivity compared to Western countries or global companies. Do you believe that? And do you think well-being kind of connects to productivity?
See, do I see it as low? I would never say, who am I to say that Japanese companies have? I mean, I've read the stats.
Well, Americans say it.
Yeah. do I believe the American? I don't know. What I do know is that if the Americans think that, maybe there's an opportunity. And maybe there's an opportunity we should look to seize, which is, that to me doesn't say that there's an unproductive workforce. That says to me that there could be much more outcomes coming from that existing workforce. The thing I admire about Japan is the commitment. There is a serious workplace commitment. The question is, how do we build a culture? And how does, this is, I say, a question for all of Japan, but all of the West as well. We have very, very, I mean, we're talking about Japan right now, but trust me, there are huge challenges in Western work culture. But in Japan, you have the employee commitment, you have the employee care. Now the question is, how do we aim that in the right way to be its most productive? And if I'm honest, I definitely think there is space to improve. Because I think in any market, you see space to improve. The market can be more productive, but great, you've got a bunch of willing people that are up for it. It's just a question of who takes first mover advantage on it.
In order to take the first move, what's the biggest challenge? How should we change?
I think it's a good question. You should buy YuLife. No,
okay.
What's the first thing?
You should buy YuLife.
Yeah. What's the first thing that you should do to change?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the company. I think every company is different. At YuLife, we have a really central set of values. I don't know if that's something everyone does here, but we have these. When we raised our Series A, we were about 30 or 50 people, and we were trying to work out how did we get here?
Okay.
How did we build a company with 30 people from nothing? And we sat down and we wrote down all of the attributes that brought us here. And we call them love being you. And we talk about give more than you take, seek the win-win, be open, be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, we talk about build the world you want to live in, realize your potential and own your goals. We talk about be present. These are values that my co-founders, Sam, and others, this is how we got to where we are. And then we just told everyone about it. We said, guys, if you've enjoyed working here and you want more people to enjoy working here, this is how you need to be. And those values they weren't just like made up, pulled out of the sky. They were authentic. And that was one step we took to help really ground us in who are we going to be?
I want to ask you about being present because, when I look at Japanese salarymen, they are always present at work. Even before COVID, we should go to the workplace like every day. We had to show up every day. Do you think that Japanese salarymen are in the present, or do you feel that it's a different thing in Japan?
I think all right, so if I were to summarize it in one big problem, in Japan, the biggest challenge is everybody really cares what everybody else thinks to like a really scary point of intensity.
Yes.
Everybody is obsessed with that person based on something I said, thinks this. Yeah. So I'm a diagnosed, I've got generalized anxiety, obsessive compulsive, and I take medication for it. But the medication I take is to literally stop me having those thoughts. So when I enter a meeting or when I'm wondering, what is that person thinking? Why are they thinking that? What could they mean? I find all of that not necessarily the most healthy use of time. It's not productive to be too worried about everyone else's thoughts. What's most productive is trying to work out how do we create value? How do we create value for our customers? How do we create value for our colleagues? But I think the obsessive nature of how we think is something I've noticed a bit in Japan, where people dwell on something a little bit too much. And just, but that, I'm sure it comes with its virtues that I'm not, I don't think I know everything about Japan. I think I'm going to learn why that's valuable. But right now, from a quite superficial lens, I think of it as something that could be quite onerous for the people and take a lot of time. And it means that a lot of times feelings can be conflated with facts.
I see.
When you do a lot of introspection like that.
Right.
At least that's what my psychiatrist tells me.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about your YuLife, because the third part we're talking about the all-in-one app. So could you explain to our audience, elaborate what YuLife is and what your app is like?
So the proposition we go to market with is we work with companies and we tell companies, great, at the moment you guys are buying a life insurance policy for all of your staff. Now, what if one can take a life insurance policy and instead of spending £100 or 1,000 yen or 10,000 yen, whatever it is, what if they were to make 50,000 yen? What if instead of being a cost to your business, it was an income to your business? And that's the hook. That's how we would explain to companies. Then we demonstrate that across thousands of customers using my technology, that people are more productive, that there's less absenteeism, there's less staff turnover, and there's generally more productivity.
Wow.
And it's through these metrics that we can calculate the return on investment for every yen spent on the value we can bring each of those companies.
I see. So it's worth the cost, because in Japan, some people think that well-being is kind of just a cost. You should not do it because it's just spending money, but you're saying that's different. There's a return.
It's very easily quantified. We just need the data, and we can show in our models, based on our experience, the impact we can have. Wow. And it's not just well-being, insurance is an amazing vehicle. And the reason insurance is a vehicle is because often businesses are already spending money on insurance.
Yes.
They already know that there's a period in the year when they're going to review that insurance policy. And right now, it's a bit of a burden. It's a burden on the companies to be buying these policies sometimes. And what we like to do is reframe it as a benefit, as a core benefit, as something that we can use it as a vehicle to tap into this well-being ecosystem.
I see.
And that, I think, is where the opportunity is for a lot of companies, to shift their benefit program into something that delivers value this year, next year, this quarter, next quarter.
So from the lens of the workers or employees, why are they using YuLife? Because usually life insurance is something not that's fun to look at, but what's the secret?
So secret is computer games. So I am a avid gamer. Yes. I still play World of Warcraft and have done so for 20 years. I play League of Legends and
great game.
A whole range of games. To my wife's dismay, after we put the kids to bed and we have dinner, I will still, go into my room and play games with internet strangers. I love it. And over the years of playing these games, I have realized something quite profound, which is when I sit down at a computer, I get a keyboard out and I start typing, and I start enjoying the game. I'm just feeling great. I'm buzzing. I can't wait. I actually can't wait to go back to the computer. I can't even pull myself away sometimes to go to bed, right? And then I turned like 20 and I started having to do tax returns. I started having to do timesheets. I started having to, pay my electric bills. And I'm sitting at the same computer with the same keyboard, the same mouse. I'm pressing the same keys, and yet I'm getting no pleasure.
No excitement.
No joy.
That's true, yeah. You don't want to do it, yeah.
But why is that?
Why?
And that question is why we're successful. Because the why there is no good reason for it. It's just bad design, bad experiences. When a lot of modern technology is built using things like lean startup and agile methodologies, and these approaches to building software really focus on functional design. What does the business user need to attain whatever the outcome is for the business? And it's successful if the user does the activity. What it should be focusing not on the feature, but on the feeling that is generated by each thing created. How we feel in today's world matters more than how it functions.
I see.
And the utility, the greatest brands in the world transcend utility to drive feelings. And the feelings become much more meaningful than any of the functions you can deliver. So when people use the YuLife application, they feel great. And they feel great because it was designed in such a way in the same mechanics that got me stuck at a computer. Arguably a little bit more accessible. If the games that I play are the equivalent of heroin, this is more like paracetamol.
Okay. So the users, when they use YuLife, they don't feel like filling a boring document or something, but it's like playing a game.
It's like pleasure.
I'll show the screens for our users, but it's like
So there was this guy called Professor Bartle, and he works at the University of Essex in London, and he did a study on some of the longest lasting games. We're not talking about games that are a flash in the pan that kind of turn up on the mobile phone and you dismiss after a couple of weeks. He talked about games that have communities that have lasted 20 years, like World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And he split people into 4 categories. He said there are 4 categories that people will determine how do you build a universe that's worthy of people. You have to acknowledge the 4 different types of people that exist. I mean, this is like one theory. His theory was that there are people that are explorers. These are people that want to understand the mechanics of the game such that they can manipulate them to their own benefit. This is your friend who was jumping into the wall in Fortnite for 9 hours and then eventually worked out you could walk through that wall. And that's an explorer. You've got achievers, people who want the maximum, the person that needs all 10 stars on the challenge that they've been presented in the game that they're playing. The people that need to finish that Sudoku puzzle within 2 minutes or less, otherwise they do not feel fulfilled. Those are more introverted characters, but then there are also extroverted characters, the other 2 personality types. One is the socializer. the people who seek fellowship. In the digital experience that exists, is fellowship available? Often I cheat a little bit. Because I deploy my application in companies primarily, pre-existing communities already exist. Fellowship is already there because you're all colleagues. And then the last one, and the one that people like to be is a bit awkward, is killers.
Killers.
The idea that people like to dominate other people. It's very uncomfortable when we talk about it in the work context, but it's naive to imagine that it's not the case. The reality is people want to win and they want other people to lose sometimes. So creating a space to allow people to win, to be the fastest at work.
Oh, so there's like a screen to show the rankings of the players?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So and that is, all of these mechanics come together to coalesce and create a single experience where you can live an escaped, controlled existence where you are self-bettering yourself and compare yourself to your colleagues and your friends.
So people like compete to become healthy.
Yeah, that's one aspect. So it's all of these aspects.
Okay.
It's you can do challenges and get 3 stars, 2 stars, or 1 star. You can do events with your friends and your colleagues. You can duel people to determine who could do more steps tomorrow.
Wow.
You can earn rewards and then become obsessed with, how do I get the most amount of rewards? That's the explorer mentality. So there's different components for different people to create different experiences.
Wow. So people start talking about YuLife in their offices, which work co-workers. So
and nobody will talk about the same aspect of the product. They'll all talk about it from a different
perspective. And you guys have coins, I heard? Yeah.
Yes.
What are the coins for?
So the idea is we created this currency of well-being, and it's nothing to do, it's just a token, right? It's like a point, like Rakuten points. For every good activity you do that betters yourself mentally, physically, or financially, we give you a couple of these points, and you collect these points, and then you can convert them to donating to plant trees, clean the water of plastic, clean the oceans of plastic, feed people who need food, get clean drinking water to those without.
Wow.
So you can donate it, but you can also get stuff that maybe you desire.
Interesting. So let's go back to the perspective of employers. So if the office, people are starting to become healthy, they're having fun.
Yeah.
So what kind of good will do that to the company?
Yeah. So I think it's around. So I there's a couple of. All right. Here's the most profound moment I had, which was when I was interviewing a couple of the early users. We launched the application to 4 companies, over 2,000 people, and they loved it. The most profound thing that I heard was that one of the junior staff members, I assume he was junior, but he came up to me and he said, "I've never spoken to my boss before, or the CEO. But because of this app, I spoke to him." Now, that was very weird for me, because I was like, "What do you mean you haven't spoken to your boss or your CEO? And he said, well, what would I talk to him about? And I think that's maybe one of the nuances in Japanese culture.
Yes,
that there's not enough.
It feels Japanese,
There should be. I like to think that I run a very flat organization where anyone can come talk to me. I don't know about you. I think I get the sense of having been in your office, everyone's very open. You're very modern in your approach, very flat. But nobody should be afraid to speak to me.
That's true.
And I think that's one of the nice things that we brought to the Japanese market. That if I've done nothing else, that one guy knows that he can speak to his boss, and his boss will enjoy speaking to him. And I think that's a real win. There are obviously loads of other benefits, such as instead of talking about getting drunk tonight, let's talk about going on a hike. Or instead of talking about something that is meaningless about what we got up to over the weekend, let's talk about how we did something to make ourselves better and how we're higher on the leaderboard. And it just gets people talking about self-betterment.
Yes.
Which is good for business.
Yeah, I think YuLife did a good thing because, especially in Japan, being able to talk to your CEO or your high-ranked professional, it's very, you get nervous. But if you can talk to him, I think that's kind of becoming healthy. That's healthy for me. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's well-being in my definition. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's go to the final part, and we want to talk about the actual results. And we'll show in the screen for our viewers that there are a lot of facts and figures that how the physical and mental well-being improved in your companies, or especially SME users have used this app regularly, and there's reduction in employee turnover. So could you introduce some of the results?
Yeah, so one of the benefits of having a really highly engaged audience, and also because we're integrated in the West with the insurance policies, we've got visibility of joiners and leavers of organizations, we can see the impact previous to us being there and post. And we've done studies with people like Forrester to demonstrate the impact that we've had on organizations. Forrester's a data business. I don't know how familiar people in Japan are with it, but it's a data reports business. And they did an independent study to understand the return on investment we are able to generate from reducing things like employee turnover, improving the absenteeism rate so that people aren't off as frequently, those kinds of things, and then ultimately improving employee satisfaction. And all of these different aspects have direct costs associated. Turnover costs a lot of money. You lose the productivity of the person that leaves. You've got to pay to recruit someone new. You know, that's quite a painful aspect, at least in the West, where employment laws aren't quite the same as they are in Japan. But absenteeism is a stress. I know in Japan people do disappear.
Right.
And that is a frustration. So building a more connected and cohesive culture at work becomes a solution to reducing this kind of behavior, which is what we facilitate. We facilitate that through the application, through the experience, and through the community and culture we help foster in the workplace.
So when companies want to implement YuLife, so can you do it seamlessly? How does it work?
So we have a, so technically we aren't officially launching just yet, although we are having early adopter customers come on board. We have a team of people that do everything from introduce you to the product. If you go to our website, someone in Japan will come and introduce you to what YuLife is. They will also help you understand how you onboard all of the members of the company to get everyone excited, engaged. We run very cool events within the company to get everyone hyped. And then we literally invite people via email or via a business code, dependent on the size of the organization, to participate in the program. And then we start providing quarterly reports, or you can just log into the administration panel where we have analytics on health and engagement of the workforce.
How about the insurance? Is it Daiichi-san insurance, or how does it work?
Yeah, so Daiichi Life have fabulous insurance products, which we are inspired by, and we think that they are ultimately really, really good at designing those products. So we expect them to be introducing those into the market as they do today. But alongside that, there are also software, a platform, which YuLife has created that enriches the entire experience. And that is exactly where YuLife comes in. And it'll likely come through the same representative from Daiichi that both can be purchased. But it is primarily Daiichi's insurance policies and then YuLife's technology.
So what do you want to accomplish? So if people in Japan start using YuLife, so how can that change the Japanese business scene? How will Japan change?
I think Japan is changing. I think I'm more going to surf the wave of the change. I think I'm going to help the businesses that already understand that they want to have a more connected work culture focused on self-improvement. And those companies will understand my business and say, this is something that embodies that value of constantly being a better version of yourself. And those are going to be my customers. And then I think I'm going to support those businesses to get there faster.
I see.
I think that's how I'm going to impact. I'm going to accelerate the journey for people in Japan to get to that point of self-betterment and realizing their potential. And I'm going to do that through insurance. I'm going to do that through people buying my platform independently of the insurance sometimes. But generally, I'm going to do it by getting people to engage with the stuff I've built and use it and enjoy it.
I was just curious, how are you going to pitch to Japanese companies to make them use your product?
So I need to disclaim everything I've said, which is I am the worst salesman in the company. I don't really know. I've never being in sales. I think is like a really professional thing, and it's not something I'm very good at. I'm really good at building products and designing them. Getting out in the front lines and actually trying to trade them is something that I've got really talented people around me to do. I think that we are going to have to work with Japanese salespeople as a primary. So we are going to be partnering with Daiichi Life and working with them on our distribution and with their representatives on our distribution. And that will be our primary route to market. There will, however, be some Japanese employees at YuLife who can also interact and engage. I think we need to really listen to the Japanese people, listen to the Japanese market, and adapt to the needs and the wants of the market, and try and not get too wrapped up in our vision and narrative that we can't see. We will need to be flexible. We will need to learn. We will need to adapt to be successful in this market. So I plan on selling through channel partners and then direct, but I'm open. I'm still learning.
Excellent. So Josh, we talked about insurance, well-being, and the difference between Japanese business and Western business. And I like the part you talked about God. But for the final part, any final message for our Pivot audience? Final words, final comments.
Yeah, I've actually heard. I wasn't very familiar with Pivot, and then a few of my friends told me how great and I've been looking at some of your videos, and I think you've got a real wide spectrum of audience, people from all different walks of life. But a lot of people who build technology or software engineers are also very engaged. And to the software engineers who are out there, and to I am CTO of YuLife, so I'm always interested in finding some of the best new software engineers.
Yes.
And if any designers resonate with what I've said, give me a call. That's I wouldn't. I'm always looking for great people. The other thing I would mention is, if you are one of those people who design products and build products for people, remember that we are not inherently worthy of somebody's time just because we built something. And we have to go really deep and be really, really, really thoughtful on everything and every interaction that person does. Not to, be the quickest, but to be the most worthy of their moment. I think that's the message I would give.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. It was very inspiring, and thanks for joining our show.
Thank you for having me.